Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. I'm Charlotte Lush, I'm the WDI Research Manager. We are really excited to speak to you about the awards today. We're not going to speak for too long as we don't want to take up too much of your valuable time, and we want to make sure that there will be lots of time at the end for questions if you have any. If you do have any questions, please use the question function and we will answer them at the end of the session. Okay, so I thought it would be good to take you through just a quick agenda before we get into the substance of the awards. So to start with, there will just be a brief introduction explaining a little bit of background about the WDI and kind of how where we're at now, and then we'll move on to talk about why we've decided to implement the Workforce Transparency Awards. After that, we'll then go on to talk about what winning an award actually means, so what you'll get if you win an award. Then we'll go on to look at the awards themselves in a little bit more detail on what the criteria are for winning awards, and then finally we will move on to the Q&A. Okay, so I thought this is just a quick overview of who we are and who is going to be speaking to you today. So I'll be introducing the WDI and then the awards, and then Rosie, Bethany and Isham will be joining slightly later on to speak about the specific awards in more detail. Okay, so I know many of you will already be really familiar with the WDI, but I thought it would just be helpful at the start to have a quick run through of what the WDI is, where it's at today, and why workforce transparency is important. So the Workforce Disclosure Initiative, or WDI, aims to improve corporate transparency and accountability on workforce issues. It provides companies and investors with comprehensive and comparable data and ultimately helps to increase the provision of good jobs worldwide. It's supported by an investor coalition that's made up of 50 institutions with $6.5 trillion of assets under management. And through our annual survey and engagement program, we generate new data on workforce practices, which our signatories integrate into their investment analysis, and practical insights onto how to address salient workforce issues. Last year, 118 companies disclosed to the WDI from 17 countries across 11 sectors. Submissions covered 10 million employees in companies' direct operations and many, many more in companies' supply chains. By increasing the volume and quality of data on workforce governance structures, risk management, health and safety, and other related practices, we enable investors to push companies to improve their policies and practices. This ultimately leads to better quality jobs in companies' direct operations and supply chains, improving the quality of workers' lives and enabling investors and companies to benefit from the consequences of good workforce management. Okay, so now on to why we've decided to introduce the Workforce Transparency Awards. So the WDI is now in its fourth cycle, and it's proven to be so far a really invaluable tool both for companies and for investors to understand the data that they have on their workforce. So taking part in the WDI is a hugely useful exercise in and of itself. And over the years, we've seen how participating companies have really grown when it comes to workforce transparency. So this is hugely commendable, and we think that there are a number of reasons as to why this should be celebrated. So first and foremost, transparency in and of itself is a good thing. It empowers companies with the information they need to create meaningful, positive change for their workers, and it also enables them to reap the benefits of doing so. Secondly, introducing awards is a way of recognising companies' positive effort and the priorities. So there are numerous reporting frameworks that companies may be encouraged to report to, but none of them offer as deep an insight into the workforce as the WDI. So participating in the WDI shows that a company is willing to prioritise understanding their workforce, and they're actually going to expend the effort to do that. This is no mean feat and should definitely be congratulated. And finally, we have seen companies advance so much over just the 4 years that the WDI has been in existence, and this progress should definitely be recognised. The positive upward trajectory of many companies when it comes to workforce reporting really does deserve to be highlighted, and leading companies that are setting the bar on corporate workforce reporting should be celebrated. Okay, so now on to what winning an award actually means. So there are a number of features to winning a Workforce Transparency Award. So award winners will receive, firstly, a physical award. So there is one exception to this, but there'll be a bit more on that when we look at the specific awards in more detail. Award winners will also be profiled in social media and on the WDI website, which will enable them to celebrate their achievements publicly to peers, to investors, and also just to the general public as well. We will provide award winners with a Workforce Transparency Award logo so that you can integrate your successes with transparency into your branding all year round. And finally, award winners will be regularly profiled as best practice in WDI resources and investor engagement, and their leading practice will be highlighted regularly to investors as well. So overall, winning an award will enable you to demonstrate to investors, to your peers, and to consumers that you're leading the way in workforce transparency. It will highlight your commitment to being open and honest about your workforce practices and enable you to showcase your success with the reputational benefits from both investors and consumers that come with this. Also, at a time when many organisations are attempting to brandish their ESG credentials, it can differentiate you from your peers in what can often be a very crowded space. So I will now hand over to Rosie, who will take you through the first group of awards in a little bit more detail.
Hi everyone, thanks Charlotte for that great intro. I'm just going to talk through the first two awards quickly and then hand over to my colleague Bethany. So the first award, which will surprise no one, is about the most complete response. So given that the aim of the WDI is to improve the quality and quantity of data companies make available on their workforce practices, this award will recognise the company or companies that provide the greatest amount of data on their workforce. And by that, we just mean those that have the highest proportion of the WDI survey completed. The second award goes to those who have public responses. So Charlotte just mentioned that there's an award that will probably have quite a few companies. That's this one. Last year, 52 companies made their whole response public, which is fantastic. Hopefully there'll be a few more this year as well. So the companies that win this award won't get the physical award, but they'll get the whole excuse me, suite of other benefits, which are also fantastic. The idea behind this award is that although obviously we're really keen for companies to provide as much data as they possibly can, for it to be as impactful as possible, it does need to be public. It needs to be available through the WDI website and available to anyone who wants to see it, so that companies can learn from each other, so that investors and the public have a full picture of how companies are managing their workforce, and to do that, the responses need to be public. So that will hopefully encourage companies to think about making as much of their data public as possible, and ideally the whole response. That's me. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Bethany and she'll take you through the next few awards. So Bethany, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Rosie, and hi everybody. I'm just going to take you through the awards that are centred around demonstrating engagement. So within this category, the first award is the most improved. So one important purpose of the WDI is to act as a tool for companies in highlighting both reporting strengths and the areas where improvements need to be made. Our investors do understand that companies don't have all the answers at this point in time, and all they're asking is that companies add to their responses each year, show a good level of willingness to engage with these issues, and an enthusiasm for being transparent about the challenges they face, as well as their successes in the field. There's great value in companies using the WDI as the aid it's designed to be, by taking on board feedback to continuously increase the amount of workforce information they collect and disclose. Therefore, the Most Improved Award seeks to recognise the company that has made the most significant improvement in their levels of workforce transparency. So it will be given to the company that has submitted to the WDI for 2 years in a row now, and in that time it's increased the amount of data they submit by the largest amount. And then secondly, we'll also be awarding the best first-time responder. So companies' workforce reporting is often in its infancy compared to other elements of ESG reporting. So it makes it all the more commendable when organisations that submit to the WDI for the first time are already able to provide good levels of data about their workforce practices. To recognise this, the Best First Time Responder Award seeks to celebrate the company that provides the greatest level of data on their workforce when participating in the WDI for the first time. So it will be given to the company submitting this year for the first time that has the most complete overall submission. Okay, and now I'm going to hand back over to Charlotte, who will go through the next two awards.
Okay, so now on to the transparency group of awards, which look specifically at certain areas of the WDI where we know data can often be lacking, but it's also some of the most important areas for companies to collect data on. So before I get into the meat of these awards, a quick note on how these awards work. So all transparency awards are based on the information that companies submit to the WDI, regardless of whether it's public or private. Although we would encourage companies obviously to make as much of their response as public as possible. This enables other companies to learn from their responses. It also demonstrates their commitment to sharing information publicly. And also, if you want to win the most public disclosure award, you should definitely be aiming to make as much public as possible. But I just thought it was worth clarifying that any data you submit to the WDI will be considered for these awards. So the first of these awards is the Best Supply Chain Transparency Award. So we know that while many companies may have a relatively good understanding of their workforce and their direct operations, this is often not actually the case when it comes to their supply chains. Workers in the supply chain can make up the largest proportion of a company's workforce, yet these workers are often most at risk of some of the most severe human rights violations. So having a meaningful understanding of the supply chain is crucial to being able to tackle this. There's also a growing acknowledgement that virtually every company will sadly have human rights violations somewhere in the supply chain. So this is something every organisation should be working towards, regardless of what sector they're in. And for all these reasons, the Best Supply Chain Transparency Award seeks to celebrate the company or companies that are leading the way by providing the most comprehensive data on their supply chains. So it is given to the company that has the highest proportion of complete answers in the sections that focus specifically on the supply chain, which is sections 11, 12, and 13. So the next award is the Best Contingent Workforce Transparency Award. So similarly to the supply chain, we know from WDI data that companies often have a much more comprehensive understanding of their direct employees than their contingent workforce. Contingent workers often have much less job security and oversight, which makes them more at risk of poor working conditions and bad practice. It's because of these reasons that we do encourage companies to have as small a contingent workforce as possible, but it's also why it makes transparency on their contingent workers as really, really important. So the Best Contingent Workforce Transparency Award seeks to celebrate the companies that have the information in place to remedy these challenges, and it is given to the company that has the highest proportion of complete answers on indicators that look specifically at how the company manages its contingent workforce. So this means that it doesn't include indicators that ask for basic metrics such as number of contingent workers. And the final award in the Demonstrating Transparency category is the Best Implementation Transparency Award. So obviously, while all data disclosed on the workforce is hugely beneficial, information setting out how companies are implementing the commitments and the strategies they have set out is crucial in understanding whether they are actually taking steps to improve working conditions for their workers. Investors especially are interested in understanding what positive change companies are driving and how they're taking responsibility for their workers. The Best Implementation Transparency Award recognises the companies that set out how they're putting these commitments into practice, and it is given to the company that has the highest proportion of complete answers on all questions that are specifically how companies are implementing any area of the WDI. I will now pass you over to Ishan to take you through our final award.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So the final award here is the reaction to COVID-19. I'm sure no one needs reminding of the devastating impact that COVID-19 has had on workforces around the world. Workforce transparency is particularly important during the pandemic. It allows for scrutiny and accountability of companies' practices, and also highlights companies that are taking positive steps to protect their workforce and promote the business resilience that is a consequence of this. This award focuses on celebrating the companies that provide the greatest levels of data on their workforce practices relating to COVID-19. It will be given to the companies that have the highest proportion of complete answers on questions that specifically ask about COVID-19. Thank you very much. Charlotte.
Hi. Okay, so we now have some time for some questions. I don't know, Rosie, if you've had any come through while we've been talking.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, we've had a few come through. Please don't feel you've missed your chance, though. So please do keep sending them through if anything springs to mind. The first one was around whether we would be publishing the disclosure scores of the winning companies. I'll just answer that quickly. No, we won't. The disclosure score, for those of you who aren't aware, is a measure of completeness of the company's response, and it's private between the investors and the company themselves. We won't, just because a company wins an award doesn't mean we will then be publishing the disclosure score. It's meant as a tool for the company to help them improve as an internal mechanism. So please don't worry about that. These awards are about celebrating and recognizing companies, not about publishing the scores. So hopefully that answers that question. The next one we had was, as a bank, we don't have many contingent workers or much for supply chain. It's a bit unfair that we won't be eligible for 2 of the 8 awards. Bethany, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure, I'll take that one. So on that, I'd just say that anybody is eligible for the 2 awards we've just mentioned there, because all companies do have a supply chain to some extent, or some kind of contingent workforce. And as Charlotte mentioned earlier, we're not awarding companies who can, for example, have the highest number of contingent workers, nor the most tiers in their supply chain, rather on how much information you can provide about whatever your business setup looks like and the number of contingent workers you have. So for that reason, anybody would be eligible for those 2 awards.
Fab, thanks. Thanks, Beth.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very, very much. There's a couple more. It's great that companies will be showcased as having good practice to the investors, but we might not be too comfortable having that information passed on to them. Ishan, do you fancy doing that one? You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Thank you very much. Since the private answers will be disclosed to investors anyway, getting an award really is only a good sign, good indication that you're doing well relative to other responders. So there's no need to worry if you're about investors seeing your answers if you're winning an award, since they're already being able to do that anyway. And next, I would say we should always let a company know before we will always let a company know if we've ever produced any case study, or if we've written anything about them, we always let them know as well. So there's no fear of bad publicity at all. It's only a good thing. It's an award, so it's only a good thing.
Thanks, Ishan. Yeah, definitely worth stressing that. Absolutely. So the last one we've got for now, unless anyone wants to send through any last-minute ones, is around. It says, how is our eligibility for these awards affected by whether we choose to make our answers private or public? Charlotte, you're the only one who hasn't answered one, so do you want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as I said earlier, every single award apart from the most public response award is based on all data that companies submit to the WDI. So it has no, whether you've marked something as public or private, has no bearing on your eligibility to win an award. And this is just because as Ishan said, all the data that is submitted to the WDI goes to the investor signatories as they're our primary audience. But we would again, I would like to emphasize we would encourage all companies to make as much of their disclosure public as possible, just because this is really helpful for letting other companies learn from your experiences, and it is a really good way of demonstrating your commitment to transparency, and also a way of winning the most public award. And also I should flag that we do foresee in the future that more answers in the WDI will be designated mandatory public, so you'll have to be public with your data then.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Good thing to bear that in mind in the future. We've had one more come through, which is around how we'd actually give the awards, and I think that that will depend slightly on the situation. So on the global situation. So we will have some kind of award ceremony, whether that's virtual or in person. I'm afraid we're not sure yet. We will have to wait and see. Lovely. Any other questions or any other thoughts from the WDI team? Oh, hang on. Sorry,
I would just like to say we're really excited about this, and we hope you are too. And yeah, looking forward to giving out some awards.
We do. Thank you, Charlotte. They're very positive note to end on. But sorry, there was one more question that just came through, so I'm sorry to steal your thunder. But but it came through, and it says to win the Public Disclosure Award, does the whole response need to be public? Yes. So that to be eligible for that award, anyone who makes their whole response public will get that stamp of approval and that award. Yes, it does have to be the whole thing. Lovely. Sorry, Charlotte, I wish you could do your positivity again. But Bethany or Ishan, do you, any kind of last words before we wrap up?
I think Charlotte's mentioned everything. Yeah, and we are really excited, and we're looking forward to getting these responses in. And yeah, hopefully this award ceremony, depending on how it can be, fingers crossed, it's yeah, I'm looking forward to it happening.
Agreed. Hope everybody else is looking forward to it as much as we are.
Fab. Thanks, guys. And Bethany, sorry, if you could just go on to the very last slide. I was just going to say there's for those of you who aren't aware, there's just some useful links and things there. Please do always get in touch. We're always happy to help. And yeah, hopefully speak to all of you soon about anything to do with the WDI that you need help with. Fab. Thanks, everyone. I think we can end it there, Charlotte, can we? We don't want to take up anyone else.
No, absolutely. Time is money.
Exactly. Brilliant, lovely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll put this recording up on the website in case you want to watch it back. But yeah, thank you very much for joining.